Largest Hormuz tunnels of Iran crushed. Hundreds of missiles buried underground.
0347 local time. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest pinch, and inside that ribbon of water, a Nimitz-class carrier is turning into a wind it does not want. Persian Gulf air. Radar paint blooming from the north shore. Somewhere under the Zagros foothills, blast doors that weigh more than a destroyer are already grinding open. The clock the Pentagon has been dreading just started ticking, and nobody in CENTCOM is sure how many minutes are left on it. The first warning is not a missile. It is silence. Iranian coastal emitters that have been chattering for 48 hours go cold all at once, the way a room goes quiet before a fight. On the bridge of the lead Arleigh Burke, the Aegis picture cleans up too fast. Threat operators know what that means. They are not being left alone. They are being framed. 18 minutes. That is the working estimate for how long the strike group has before the first salvo reaches terminal phase if the tunnels north of Bandar Abbas open in sequence. 18 minutes to clear a kill box the size of Connecticut while shepherding 3 commercial tankers that did not get the memo to turn around. The geography is the trap. Hormuz is not a sea. It is a hallway. On one wall, the Musandam Peninsula. On the other, the entire southern coast of Iran, layered like a missile cake, Keshem Island, Hengam, Larak, Hormuz itself, and behind them the mainland batteries dug into mountainsides that took a decade to hollow out. Anything that floats inside that hallway is inside somebody's engagement envelope. The carrier knows it. The Iranians know the carrier knows it. That mutual knowledge is the whole game. Underneath the rock, the picture is colder and more methodical. For years, satellite passes cataloged the same scene over and over: trucks vanishing into hillside portals, fresh spoil heaps, ventilation stacks disguised as goat sheds. What was being built down there is now executing. Ballistic missiles on canisters. Anti-ship cruise missiles on rail systems. Loitering munitions stacked like cordwood. The largest of the Hormuz-adjacent complexes is not a bunker. It is a city. A subterranean missile city, with rail spurs, command nodes, fuel galleries, and crew quarters, bored hundreds of meters into stone, the Tomahawk was never designed to dig through. This is the part most analyses get wrong. The tunnels were never the weapon. The tunnels are the magazine. The weapon is the geometry above them. Because at the same moment the carrier is repositioning, fast attack craft are already shoving off from coves on the Iranian-side Paycup-class hulls. Blade Runner racers retrofitted with rocket pods. Gadir midget submarines slipping out under the thermocline. None of them, individually, threaten a destroyer. Collectively, they do something more dangerous. They saturate the decision space. They force every Sibes, every SM-2, every helicopter, every lookout to ask the same question at the same second. Which one is the real one? That question has a price. And the price is measured in interceptors. A standard missile 6 costs roughly $4 million per round. An Iranian explosive-laden speedboat costs less than a used pickup. A Shahed-style one-way attack drone, the same airframe that became famous over Ukrainian power plants, comes in under $50,000. Iran does not need to win the exchange. Iran needs the United States to keep paying $4 million to kill $50,000 problems until the magazine in the vertical launch cells runs dry. The math does not care about flags. The math just runs. 12 minutes now. The E-2D Hawkeye orbiting south of the strait pushes a new track picture. Something has changed on the Iranian coast. 3 tunnel portals near Bandar-e-Jask have opened simultaneously. Thermal blooms in the sand. Transporter erector launchers rolling out on pre-surveyed firing pads, the geodesy already burned into the guidance computers. The Iranians are not improvising. They are executing a script written years ago, on terrain they own to the centimeter. The first volley is not aimed at the carrier. It is aimed at the airbase across the water. Because the doctrine is older than the missiles. If you want to blind a carrier strike group, you do not shoot the carrier first. You shoot the eyes. You shoot the runways at Al Udeid and Al Dhafra. You crater the taxiways the F-35s need. You hit the fuel farms, the AWACS aprons, The Patriot launchers parked in the open. You don't sink the ship, you isolate it. A carrier without land-based air cover inside Hormuz is a very expensive island with a 4.5-acre flight deck and a target on the roof. This is the reframe. The strait is not the prize. The strait is the bait. The real campaign is happening 400 kilometers behind the front, where Iranian K-Bersheken and Fateh-class hypersonic glide vehicles are arcing over the Gulf at speeds that compress the defender's decision cycle into the single digits of seconds. Mach 5. Mach 8. Terminal maneuvers that turn a textbook ballistic trajectory into something Patriot operators describe with words that don't pass network filters. Some get through. Most do not. But most do not is not a victory condition when the few that do are landing on hardened aircraft shelters with American tail numbers inside. Back over the water, the swarm arrives. Not all at once. In pulses. Designed pulses. First wave is decoys cheap, radar reflective, kinematically dumb. They exist to be shot. They exist to make the Aegis picture bloom red and to drain the magazine. Second wave is the workers' Shahed 136s with terminal seekers, low and slow, hugging the wave tops, their lawnmower engines audible to deck crews before they are visible. Third wave is what the second wave was hiding. Nor and Cater anti-ship cruise missiles, sea skimming, popping up only in the last seconds to acquire. And behind them, the thing nobody wants to be the first to confirm a ballistic anti-ship missile, the Persian Gulf's answer to the Chinese DFT-21. Dropping out of the upper atmosphere with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle that does not care about your speed of advance. The phalanx sows on the lead destroyer spools up. 20mm tungsten at 4,500 rounds per minute, the last line, the wall of lead. Ram launchers cycle. SM cells open. Electronic warfare suites on the E-18G Growlers airborne to the south start lying to the incoming seekers, feeding them false ranges, false bearings. Ghost ships that are not where the ghosts say they are. This is the invisible war. The one without flame trails. The one where a software patch fielded 6 months ago is worth more than a forget. 9 minutes. And then, 400 kilometers to the northwest, a different war begins. A second carrier, the one the Iranians did not factor into the geometry, has been silent for 36 hours under emissions control off the coast of Oman. Its air wing launches in a sequence the Iranians cannot see, because the launch cycle is masked by terrain shadow against the Hajar Mountains. 40 minutes earlier, in a calculation that started long before the speedboats left their coves, B-2 Spirits departed Diego Garcia. They are not carrying conventional ordnance, they are carrying the only weapon in the American inventory designed for exactly this map. The Jibu 57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. 30,000 pounds. Steel casing engineered to survive impact velocities that would atomize any conventional bomb. A warhead designed to keep punching after the first 60 meters of reinforced rock, after the second, after the third, fusing only when it reaches the void it was built to find. The tunnels were never invulnerable. They were merely expensive to address. The question was always whether the political will existed to pay that price. The Iranians bet it did not. That bet is now being tested in real time. The first MOP enters the largest of the Bandar Abbas complexes through a ventilation shaft the Iranian engineers thought was too narrow to be targeted. It is not. The targeting solution was built from 12 years of overhead imagery, ground-penetrating radar from civilian seismic surveys quietly purchased through intermediaries, and one human source whose name will not appear in any document for 50 years. The bomb finds the main gallery. The overpressure wave moves through the tunnel network at the speed of sound in air, which in a confined volume is not a metaphor. It is a piston. Down there, in the rock, the missiles that were supposed to close Hormuz are buried by their own ceiling. Hundreds of them. Stacked, fueled, canistered, ready and now compressed under 1 million tons of collapsed limestone. Crew quarters. Command nodes. Fuel galleries. The subterranean city becomes its own tomb in under 90 seconds. The second MOP enters a complex near Jask. The third finds a coastal cruise missile bunker on Keshem. The pattern is not random. The pattern is the same pattern the analysts have been staring at for a decade, finally executed against the targets that pattern was always drawn for. This is the irreversible turn. Because what just happened underground cannot be reshot, redecided, renegotiated. Concrete that took 12 years to pour does not get repoured during a war. The Iranian strategic depth, the very thing that made the Strait of Hormuz strategy credible, has just been reduced by a percentage that intelligence agencies will spend the next month arguing about and the next decade lying about. Above the water, the picture does not improve immediately. The first salvo is already inbound. 2 destroyers in the screen are now firing in continuous engagement mode. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser, the old workhorse with 96 Veal cells, is the spine of the air defense bubble. Cells are emptying fast, faster than the doctrine wants. There is a moment, captured later in declassified after-action reports that will not be declassified for 30 years, where the air defense commander has to make a call no peacetime exercise prepared him for. 2 inbound tracks. 1 interceptor left in the optimal engagement geometry. Which one does he kill? He picks the one closer to the carrier. The other one hits a destroyer. Not a kill, not a sinking, a hit. Above the waterline, port side, just aft of the bridge. 12 sailors are wounded. 2 are killed. The ship maintains way, it maintains weapons, it maintains the picture. American naval damage control is, and has been for 80 years, the quiet superpower nobody puts in the brochure. The ship keeps fighting. But the photograph of that hole in the hull will define how this engagement is remembered, regardless of what happens in the tunnels. 6 minutes. The Iranian fast attack craft cross their commit line. This is the geometry they trained for close enough that American defensive fires have to discriminate between the speedboats and the tankers behind them, far enough that the rotors and gunships have to come down into manpad's altitude to engage. Apaches off the amphibious group push in low over the water. Seahawks vector with hellfires. The boats start dying in pairs, then in 4s. But every boat that dies in the last mile dies inside the missile envelope of something that already launched. The cost exchange, in this minute, is the worst it will get all night. A $4 million interceptor for a $40,000 drone. A $100 million gunship hovering inside the engagement zone of a $2,000 shoulder-launched system. A $1 billion destroyer absorbing a hit from a missile whose unit cost is rounding error in the Iranian defense budget. The economics are upside down by design. The Iranians did not build this kill box to win it. They built it to make winning it unaffordable. What they did not price in was the willingness to address the magazine instead of the missiles. 3 minutes. The second carrier's air wing arrives on station. Super Hornets with AN-158C LRASM's long-range anti-ship missiles with autonomous target recognition push into the Iranian coastal defense network from a vector the radar picture was not built to see. Growlers blanket the spectrum. F-35s, operating in roles their pilots are not allowed to describe at dinner parties, slip into Iranian air defense bubbles and report back not what they see, but what the air defense bubbles do not see. The Iranian S-300 batteries near Bandar Abbas, the prize of the long Russian arms relationship, light up briefly, then go dark, some because they are killed. Some because the operators understand that lighting up is now a death sentence. The strait does not close. That is the sentence that will define this night in the history books, after the smoke and the lies and the press conferences and the oil futures markets. The strait does not close. 3 commercial tankers transit south under escort within 12 hours. Insurance premiums for Gulf shipping triple by sunrise. Brent crude opens $22 higher and does not come back down for a quarter. The global economy pays its tax for what just happened, and the tax is not small. But the choke point, the thing the entire Iranian strategic posture in the Gulf was designed to threaten, does not close. In the wider strategic picture, this is the irreversible math. China, which buys nearly half of all crude that moves through Hormuz, has just watched its single most important energy artery be defended by an American carrier strike group at a cost Beijing did not have to pay. That is a debt that will be collected in some currency at some later date. Russia, which sold the air defense systems that did not save the tunnels, has just watched its export catalog get a poor review in front of every other customer on Earth. The Gulf monarchies who spent the last decade hedging will spend the next decade unhedging. Israel, which has been arguing for years that the underground complexes were the actual center of gravity, will spend the next morning not saying "I told you so," and the entire region will hear it anyway. Inside Iran, the calculation is harder and quieter. The Irk missile force still exists. Plenty of it. The tunnels that were hit are a fraction of the total, even if they are the largest fraction. The doctrine of asymmetric pressure on Hormuz has not been deleted. It has been demonstrated, and that demonstration has costs in both directions. Tehran now knows with operational certainty that the magazine is not safe. The Pentagon now knows with operational certainty that the cost of one night of defending the strait is measurable in real ships and real sailors. Both sides have new information. New information is what changes doctrines. New doctrines are what start the next war or prevent it. By 0615 local, the Hormuz picture is quiet enough that the carrier turns out of the wind. Damage control parties on the wounded destroyer are still working. Bodies of Iranian fast-attack crewmen drift in the channel, recovered later by Omani vessels under a flag that exists for exactly this purpose. Smoke rises from 3 coastlines on 2 continents. The sun comes up over the Zagros and lights, from above, the collapsed entrances of tunnels that for 12 years were the most expensive secret in the Iranian arsenal. Hundreds of missiles, buried with the rock that was supposed to protect them. The strait stayed open. The magazine did not. The cost exchange was upside down all night, and the side that paid the higher bill still walked away with the choke point. That is the kind of outcome that does not fit on a Chiron, because it is not a victory in the way television wants victory to look. It is a balance sheet. And on that balance sheet, the line that matters is the one nobody photographed the missiles that will never be launched, because the ceiling came down before the launch order did. What happens next is not in the Gulf. What happens next is in the boardrooms of every navy in the world that has spent the last decade betting that magazines under mountains were a permanent answer to American sea power. That bet just got repriced. Every coastal defense doctrine on Earth, Chinese, Russian, North Korean, every smaller state that watched and learned wakes up the next morning needing a new chapter. Underground is no longer sanctuary. Underground is just a slower target. If you want the breakdown of how the MOP actually finds a tunnel it has never seen before, that is the next video. If you think the decision to address the magazine instead of the missiles was the moment the entire equation flipped, say so in the comments. And if you want more tactical reconstructions at this depth, subscribe, because the next one is already being mapped. The strait is still open. The tunnels are not. Somewhere, in a room with no windows, the next map is already on the wall.